Just make sure you're settled, sitting up straight, and we're going to start now to close our eyes. And let's start with a long deep breath through the nose. Another deep one. Now we're going to do 4 short breaths. Long, 4 short, long, 4 short, long, 4 short, and sigh it out. Now just keep your eyes closed. Just stay inside. Really relax now. We're going to take a few minutes to get you centered, to get you connected to the fire within. Of course, that fire element which consumes and burns away the old and which brings in the light and the passion for the new. But to start off with, just feel in your body any parts that are heavy, parts that feel stagnant or resistant, slight pain perhaps. Also just be aware of any parts that feel open and free-flowing. And now take a deep breath to shift the energy. Shift out of the old stuck energy and just let there be flow and openness throughout. And now be aware of your emotions, feelings of the day, the morning, the prominent emotions perhaps of the last few days. Just sit with them, see them in all their beauty or all their ugliness. See the emotions that you enjoy, but also the ones that you struggle with. Just see, just observe. And now another long deep breath to let them go and sigh them out. As you sigh out, you just make space for more love, unconditional love for yourself, unconditional love for others, so that you can just be quiet yet fulfilled. And now be aware of your thoughts, worries, doubts, preoccupations, anxieties. And today, of course, with our process, we work very specifically with the mental aspect through our breath, and the fire aspect helps us balance. So we're working to invite a higher frequency of thought and consciousness and wisdom into our beings, into our lives. So take a deep breath, and that sweeps away the low frequency thoughts, it sweeps away the mental toxins and just replaces that opens the way for your higher consciousness. And now feel spirit or your soul or your higher self, that divine aspect of you in the air around you. Perhaps you see it or feel it like swirling energy. Maybe that has a color or a feeling. Just feel very strongly that it fills the space around you. It fills your aura, almost putting a slight pressure, pleasant pressure, a pressure of feeling held, feeling supported, a presence of the divine. And now breathe it in. By breathing it in, you take it into your body and your consciousness and your emotions. By breathing it in, you give it permission to work with you for healing, for awareness, so that you can just go beyond the ego, go beyond the things that hold you back. And now, as we spend a bit of time here with ourselves, centered, perhaps let's take a moment to take stock of our lives at this time, specifically around the element of fire, specifically, first of all, just become aware of the areas of your life where there's lots of fear and anxiety. Aware of the ways in which your body and your emotions register this fear and anxiety. Or maybe where it's held, how it expresses. And this fear might feel like a heaviness or a stuckness. It might feel like shutting down in either different areas of your body or different areas of your life. Just take a deep breath. Hold it in a little bit, and then when you exhale, just feel how you allow your muscles and your body to surrender. Just to soften, and just feel how you let go of that vigilance perhaps, or how you let go of that holding on, how you let go of being centered on the outside of your life, of your world, and how you just enter a place of trust within yourself, trust of the divine. And in this surrender, you also give permission for the fire, for the conscious breath, to address those fears and anxieties, to shift them so that you can become more centered and more on track with your purpose and your spirituality. And as we continue to take stock of where we are, maybe you now want to become aware of the areas of your life where you have lots of passion and enthusiasm, or otherwise where you lack passion and enthusiasm. This might be a general area, it might be something very specific. You might have slight depression or apathy, feeling of hopelessness, stuckness, which means your fire is low in those areas. But at the same time, remember the areas where you feel enthusiastic, carried by your inspiration, inspired to do. And the one aspect might be smaller than another, that's absolutely fine. Just as you give consciousness and awareness to this now, let the light, the fire within, the passion within grow. And if any of that passion is frantic in your life, frantic in the way that it becomes anxiety, bring that down and calm it. Where the fire is low, bring that energy up and balance it. And you kind of become aware of a fire burning evenly and in a balanced manner in your body and being. And as this first step, this process involves you just becoming aware of it consciously, mentally, emotionally, physically perhaps, our intention today is to completely balance this out through our breath work, through our closeness to the element of fire, so that the healing and the balancing may take place in unconscious ways as well as conscious ways. So just take another deep breath now. And you can start to return, opening eyes back in the room. Good. So we'll start with drawing a card for our session today and for what we're working with, and then we will go into our talk, a little bit about fire. So I'm just going to draw this card for the group, and it is the goddess Eurybia. I think we had her recently actually. So Eurybia is actually about emotion, about channeling emotion in an appropriate way. So as opposed to the waters of emotion going all over the place, it's about creating the channel and the sort of guidance for our emotions to flow. So of course, you know, I guess a swamp is a good metaphor for that. You know, when water is in a swamp and it doesn't move, it kind of spreads all over the place, it starts to stagnate, and you know that creates stuck energy. But for example, you know, when people drain swamps, they create a canal, they allow all the water to flow down the canal, and then the land around it becomes sort of dry or arable. And that's very fitting for our emotional lives. We need to kind of create certain boundaries around our emotions. And you know, I know people often say to feel is to heal, and in some ways it's true, but sometimes, you know, getting too stuck in our feelings can also become self-indulgent, or we start to wallow in inappropriate emotions. And that's particularly true, I think, nowadays with lockdown and with the uncertainty of the times. It's very easy to get into a kind of a wallowing state, or a fear or a paralyzed state. So creating a kind of emotional channel is really important. And you know, a very simple exercise and a nice way to do it is to maybe sit with affirmations, you know, to do some affirmations where you write an appropriate affirmation, like let's say, I forgive myself, if that's what you're working with, or I allow my passion to burn in my life, given that that's our theme today. And then whenever you write that down, I allow my passion to burn in my life, you'll write a reaction to that. So the reaction could be, no, that's not true. Or it could be, yes, I love my fire, or I'm feeling something happening in my heart. But, whatever comes to mind first off, you write that down. And you do that for a full page, writing the affirmation on one side and then writing down the reaction, whatever that reaction is. And by the end of that page, you should get an interesting overview of which emotions are coming up in response to your affirmation. And from there, once you've seen that response kind of written down on paper, then you can start to do something about it. You maybe notice, okay, well, I'm particularly negative at the moment, or my body is really heavy. My body keeps bringing up reactions, or I'm dreading the future. So once you've done that, you can start to reflect on, which affirmations you would like to keep working with in order to shift and change those negatives. And when we can really see what our emotional life is doing, then we can rectify it somehow. Again, that exercise of working with the affirmations is the means to create the channel for the emotions, but it's also the means to express the emotions, to let them flow completely. And then through that awareness and consciousness, you can actually start to express more appropriate emotions. I think in many ways emotions are a choice. Obviously when there's great grief, or when there's very specific stuff we're confronting, or something very powerful has come up, it's a very different story. But when we're in our day-to-day lives and we're kind of in this little bit of a no man's land that we are at the moment, a lot of inappropriate emotions can come up. So that is the element of water that the emotions relate to, and we will actually be working with water breathwork in our next breathwork session in August. And in a way, water and fire are very opposite elements. But, in a spiritual sense, of course, the elements are never opposite. They are never about one, countering the other. The purpose of all spiritual work, especially breath work, is to balance the different elements within ourselves. And I think one of the very powerful things with any breathwork session, whether you work with the elements or not, is that by the end of your, let's say, 40-minute breathing session, the different aspects of self, the different elements are balanced. And just in a nutshell, those four elements are earth, which is our physical body and our relationship to our physical world. Water is our emotions and our relationships with other people. Air is our mind and our communication. And fire is our passion. It's our anger, our fear, and our anxiety as well. So again, going back to some of the images I used during the process a moment ago, that fire, if it burns evenly, is like an even fire that can transmute. It's the alchemical fire that kind of burns steadily. If that fire is too low, there's not enough light, and the fire doesn't give us the power or the energy or the heat to kind of move forward or to get things done. So we kind of become depressed. And symbolically speaking, that might be that the water element is too strong. The water element is bringing the fire down. And if the fire burns too bright, then we become manic. Then there's too much anxiety, or we're too vigilant in our lives. So the purpose always is to get that fire to burn evenly, and in so doing to create the fires of alchemy. And with all of the four element work that we do, the key aspect is the consciousness that we bring into the work. So the very fact that it's very different sitting in front of a fire, on your phone and having a beer, to sitting in front of a fire with consciousness, with the intention of connecting with that element, with the intention of doing breath work or meditation in front of the fire. It's that intention and consciousness that changes. And it's almost like when we have that intention, we start to build a relationship with the element. When we build that relationship, we can let that element in. So it's not just a thing that's kind of happening there, that we're sitting in front of. It becomes a motor that really pushes us forward in our spiritual growth. So of course, that's what we're doing today. For those of you who have a big open fire, that's the ideal. But for those of you who don't, who will have a few candles burning, that's just as good, because again, it's the intention that makes it powerful. And it's the intention that connects you to that energy. And of course, an open flame is something very physical. It's something that the body responds to. It's something that in this physical reality where we are working, that we kind of directly enter or associate with the portal that flame creates, the portal that takes us into that world of what fire represents. And that's the real purpose of having an open flame with us. Even though it's just one little flame, the fact is it is there, it is holding an energy, and we through our consciousness are connecting with that energy. And when we are in that physical presence, it works unconsciously. We don't need to think about it. We don't need to keep thinking, I've got to be aware of the fire. I've got to hold the energy of fire. No, the element of fire itself is holding the energy of fire. So your work then through this breathwork process is to keep the breathing going. The breathing, as I mentioned before, relates to the element of air. The element of air relates to the mind, the consciousness. So when we breathe consciously, we are first of all raising the frequency of our thoughts so that we can let go of the distracting thoughts, because they become like a cloud and a fuzz that prevents us from seeing clearly. So the first step is to just remove those clouds a little bit so that we can open up. When we can start to open up in our mind, in our consciousness, we become more aware of what's happening around us. We enter a bit of a trance, which allows us to perceive other levels of being, more subtle aspects, spiritual aspects. So there we start to open. As we open in that way, we can start to absorb more of those kind of higher frequency energies. And then of course, at the same time, we can absorb more of that fire element and what it represents. So that flame becomes kind of more empowered by the fact that we are opening up and surrendering. So through the breathing that we're going to be doing, the real purpose of that breathing is to get us into the trance. The trance potentializes the presence of the fire. And then as we keep the breathing going through the process, we let the fire and the breath and our soul kind of all work together to give us downloads, to shift energy in the body, to bring in healing, of course, to bring in prana through the breath, so that we can really be filled up with new energy, so that we can just be sort of realigned to the true person that we are, to our true potential. So, working specifically with fire physically in the space relates to this principle of, spiritual ritual. It's one thing to think about something and visualize it in your consciousness. It's another thing to take your body and your subconscious mind through the process of creating a ritual, lighting a candle, lighting a fire, taking the care to make it happen is the ritual. That already in itself puts you into a different state of consciousness. It kind of creates a threshold between the normal world and the normal life and consciousness. You create the space and then you step into that other world again, another world that is more open and that can connect you to different dimensions more powerfully and intensely. So the main purpose of what we're doing today is fire purification. So again, we're working with the naked flame to absorb the stuff that is sitting on a very deep level that needs to be shifted and moved out. And the symbolism of fire is very obvious. The symbolism of fire relates to light, first of all, warmth, and everything that goes with that. So, the warmth aspect, one could say, is, the warming of the heart. It's the warming of ourselves in such a way that we can feel comfortable, in our bodies, first of all, and that we can then kind of share that warmth with those around us. So it becomes a sharing of energy between bodies with those that we love. So it's a warming of the heart. It's a connecting to other people. And, for anyone who sits around fire from time to time with other people, we all know that somehow when we sit around fire with someone, we really connect to them on another level. Kind of something else clicks in, and we just really feel connected, not only to the fire, but to each other and the night and the elements. So it's a very grounding and connected space that one creates when in front of fire. Then, of course, there's the light aspect that the fire brings in. So first and foremost, whenever you turn on a light, whenever you light a flame, that immediately dispels darkness. And I think that's the main thing that fire is about. So when you bring light in, you are going to be dispelling darkness in yourself. Or you will be seeing the stuff that's in there, that's in that, let's say, that room. If we imagine that our consciousness is a room, and maybe we've got a very small flame burning in that room, meaning that we're seeing a very small bit, very faintly, of who we are. Of course, when we bring in greater light, maybe we add a whole lot of other flames, or we switch on some other light, then we can really see everything that's happening in that room, or at least a whole lot more of what's happening in that room. And that, of course, is bringing into awareness and consciousness things about ourselves, things about our lives, where we have realizations and inspirations. Very often those realizations are about ourselves, about our behaviors, about what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. But then there's also very often inspirations that come where we understand things about the world, where we understand how the world works and how we're doing the right or the wrong things, whatever that means, but how we understand our role in the world and how we are relating to the energy, the wisdom, the things that are happening out there. Very often we behave inappropriately, to external stimuli because of our conditioning, because of our opinions, because of kind of the filters that we have learned to, or the limits within which we've learned to live. We kind of can't see that stuff there. We can only kind of see along this channel or tunnel ahead. So, as the light of consciousness expands, of course, we can see a whole lot more. And sometimes that's painful because we see things that don't fit our concept, that don't fit who we think we are, or how we think we're doing things. But then when we have consciousness, even though it's painful, we can do something about it. And that's what's really important. We need to see so that we can change. And sometimes that happens energetically. Sometimes we just have a very powerful knowing of this isn't right, this isn't working, or in this way I'm behaving badly. And then a shift kind of happens, and one could say by the grace of God, we attract the people or the circumstances into our lives, or the will into our lives that helps us make a change. And that's of course always a great gift and a great bonus, because it's kind of an effortless change. But then there are the other times that we can see something in our lives, like a habit that we're in, that we realize we have to actually put work in, we have to put consciousness in, we have to retrain the subconscious mind, the physical body, in order to live in a new way, or to hold a different energy and a different frequency. And again, of course, that's what spiritual practice is about. It's about taking the time every day or, regularly in order to show up and to sit with ourselves, to sit with the divine, to reflect and, make the space for the change to happen. And sometimes that is very reflective, like through meditation. Other times it's, it might be something where we say, okay, well, I've been too sluggish, I need to exercise more. And then it can be an exercise program, or it can be going for walks, or it can be deciding that, you've neglected your housework and, you go on a spring cleaning phase. All of those, when done with consciousness, are spiritual practices. So it's almost like, the downloads of inspiration are incredibly important. And then the doing in the world is kind of the continuation of that. And, what we're doing here today is getting the download of inspiration, hopefully. So we're going to be doing the breath work. We'll start that in a moment. The breath work, of course, is very simple. For those of you who are new, we have a few new people here today. We're just going to be breathing through the nose, if possible. And we want to establish a regular breathing rhythm. And that breathing rhythm does need to be a connected breath. So what that means is the in-breath flows into the out-breath, flows into the in-breath like this. As opposed to so we're breathing a little bit faster than normal. We're keeping that breath connected. Keeping the breath connected, we also keep that breath conscious. And in keeping the breath conscious, you don't need to think about anything. I will be guiding you through the whole process. I'll be kind of prompting you, giving affirmations, but your work is just to keep that breath conscious. You don't have to physically think about anything or physically do anything. You don't have to keep remembering the fire. You just need to breathe more and more to surrender. In fact, the more you surrender, the more you let go, the more you get out of your head, the better it is, because the head, the consciousness, the mental aspect is kind of a barrier to entering the trance. So we really want to go out of the head, and we want to let the body, the subconscious mind, do its thing. Because we have this inner healer, this inner intelligence that knows what we need in order for us to be balanced. Be that mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally. Our inner self kind of knows what balance looks like and feels like. It knows what we are doing that is imbalanced or wrong. So when we breathe in this way, we are just surrendering the willful aspect of our ego, which is saying, well, I do insist on doing this, or I insist on eating that. And we get that out of the way so that sort of the inner healer can make any of the adjustments that need to be made. And usually about halfway through the breathwork session, the breathing becomes a whole lot easier, and we flow with the breath, and then we enter trance. Things start to happen, changes start to take place, which are, of course, what we're hoping for in this process, to enter a space of divine connection, a space of divine inspiration, so that we can see beyond our ego and so that we can expand our consciousness. And usually, the first 10 to 15 minutes can be a little bit more challenging in the breath work. Maybe it feels like you're not putting your head or getting your head out of the way, or frustrations might come up, or irritations, distractions. Otherwise you could get tetany, which is like a tightness in the hands. That can be sometimes alarming. It can be quite painful, but that's quite normal. It's something that does happen, and it's nothing to be alarmed about. We can have energy rushes up and down the body, tightness in different parts, tingling, sometimes the lips sort of clamp up. All of those physical reactions can happen. And of course, when they come up, try and imagine, visualize that the flame, the fire absorbs that. So you want to give that away to the fire. You want to surrender that energy, because what's happening is as you breathe, as you kind of start to expand your consciousness, those blockages start to show themselves and they become pronounced. So if nothing else, you don't have to think about or understand what those, let's say, physical aspects are that are coming up. You just want to breathe into it. Take your breath and your awareness into it. On the inhale, you're taking in the life force energy always. You're taking in prana. On the exhale, you're always breathing out, letting go of the stuff that you no longer need. And that is, of course, the natural cycle of breathing. The inhale is taking in divine life force energy, prana. The exhale is expelling stuff, getting rid of the stuff that is no longer appropriate for you to have or hold in your body and being. And again, even in that process, you can surrender that to your soul or your inner healer, knowing that, what goes in is nourishing and what goes out is just being dropped as is appropriate. But of course, you have, the fire as your support throughout this whole process. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time now to set up your space. So you'll be lying down. Of course, you'll be lighting some candles or you'll be in front of a fire. Obviously, just be very careful. You don't want to have blankets that can sort of fall onto the flame or, that can get ignited. So, keep your candles at a safe distance away. My suggestion is 4 candles if you can manage that. Maybe one at the head, one at the feet, at a safe distance, and then one on either side. So you're kind of creating a nice circle that you'll be working in. And you don't need to have those candles, really close, as long as they're safe, a safe distance away. That's really important. Have your blanket, have your pillow, mattress, of course. If you do want to attach, a wireless speaker or another speaker so that the sound is perhaps better, louder, when we do this work, I will be playing some music as well. So it is nice to sort of have an immersive sound experience as you do the breathing. So yes, I'll give you a little bit of time now to set up, to go to the bathroom as well, and then we'll go into the breath. If you do have any questions about this while we take the break, please do put them in the chat and I'll answer them before we go into the session. Okay, so I'll be back in a sec. Thank you.